They called me trash, and they said it in front of everyone. They pointed at my belly and laughed, "That baby will be trash too." I was 20 years old. I thought love would save me. That night taught me love was the first thing they would take away. My name is Loretta Miles. I am 73 now, an old woman with tired bones and a steady voice. This is not a fairy tale. This is a memory I carried like a stone in my chest. I kept quiet for decades, but tonight, I want you to hear it. Because silence protected no one, least of all me. I started in the kitchen of the Whitmore family, the biggest restaurant in town. I was just the black girl in the back, chopping, scrubbing, staying late. They never called me a chef. They called me the help. But I had talent. I knew it every time a sauce came out perfect, every time a guest asked for seconds. Still, no one saw me. No one except him, Daniel Whitmore, the owner's son. He worked shifts in the dining room, carried trays, learned the ropes. He smiled at me across the steam. He slipped notes into my apron pocket, little words like tonight and stay. I believed him. I let myself believe. He told me I was more than the kitchen. He told me I was his future, and I let him close enough that I carried his child. I thought that would bind us. I thought love was strong, but I was young and foolish, and I didn't understand what family power meant in a white man's world. The night it happened, they pulled me to the front. Daniel had planned something, I thought. Maybe he would stand up to them. Maybe he would claim me. He held my hand under the lights, and for a moment, I thought it was real. Then Arthur and Margaret Whitmore walked in. His parents, owners, gods in that room. Arthur's voice cut the air first. "Who let the help in here?" He stared at me like I was dirt on his shoe. "This is family space." "You don't belong." Margaret pointed straight at my stomach. "If she's pregnant, that bastard child will never carry our name." She sneered, her voice sharp enough to cut. "A black girl from the kitchen thinking she can trap my son. Disgusting. Out. Get out, before you shame this house any further." I heard chairs scrape. I heard someone laugh. A guest whispered, "Imagine, a maid wanting to be the lady of the house." I turned to Daniel. I waited. My eyes begged him to fight for me. He swallowed hard. His lips shook. Then he said the words that broke me. "I can't go against my parents. I'll lose everything." He let go of my hand, just like that. Someone tugged at my apron. The knot snapped. The cloth slid down to the floor. The sound of fabric hitting tile was louder than thunder in my ears. People chuckled. One woman clapped, as if a performance had ended. I stood still. I did not cry. I did not beg. I memorized every word. Trash. Bastard. Do not belong. I stacked them inside me like bricks. Then I walked out. Past the tables. Past the stairs. Through the back door. In the alley, I touched my belly and whispered, "We will live, and we will remember." That was the night Loretta Miles died as the girl in the kitchen. That was the night I became something else. Because every insult they threw, I caught it. I kept it. I let it burn slow. They thought it would bury me. It fed me instead. You need to understand, this story is not about pity. This is about debt. The Whitmores wrote their insults into my skin, and I promised myself one day I would write the ending. Not with tears, not with screams, but with work and time and fire. So if you stay with me, you will hear how I turned shame into fuel. You will hear how I built kitchens of my own. You will hear how, after 20 years, I walked back through the same door that slammed in my face, and I made them work for me. This is not a story of forgiveness. This is not a sermon. This is a ledger. On one side, their cruelty. On the other side, my labor. Tonight I balance it. My name is Loretta Miles. They called me trash. They called my son dirt. I carried those words through every shift, every burn, every night I thought I would not make it. And when the day finally came, I set the table, and I served those words back to them, cold. That night I went home. A leaking roof, a thin mattress, a silence so heavy it pressed on my chest. I touched my belly and whispered, "We will live. We will not forget. That was the only promise I had left. The morning came too soon. My eyes were swollen, but I forced myself out. I walked to the first diner down the street. I asked for work. The man behind the counter looked me up and down. He smirked. "We do not hire drama in this place." I left before he could say more. At the second kitchen, the whispers followed me. A waitress leaned close to another and said, "That is the girl who tried to trap the Whitmore boy." I heard it clear. I kept walking. At the third place, the owner shook his head. "Go home, sweetheart. No one wants that kind of scandal near their food." I swallowed my pride. I had no choice. Pride does not pay rent. Everywhere I went, the same words circled me like flies. Trash, trouble, do not belong. They thought their judgment would finish me, but I carried those words inside, storing them like wood for a fire. Months later, Marcus was born. A tiny cry in a dark room, a cry that cut through every doubt. He was small, red-faced, his fists clenched as if ready to fight the whole world. From that moment, I knew I could not stop. No one else would feed him but me. No one else would fight for him but me. Life became a list of shifts. I scrubbed school floors at dawn. I chopped onions in a diner until my hands stung. I washed dishes in a bar until midnight. I carried Marcus on my hip when no one else would watch him. I rocked him to sleep on the back steps of kitchens that did not even know his name. Every night I dropped coins in a jar. Pennies for milk, nickels for rent, dimes for tomorrow. Some nights the jar was nearly empty. Some nights I stared at it and thought, how long can I keep this up? Then I would hear Marcus cough or feel his hand curl around my finger, and I knew the answer. As long as it takes. The streets never let me forget. People pointed when I walked by with laundry on my shoulder. They muttered loud enough for me to hear. "There she is, the maid who thought she could be the lady." Others laughed when they saw Marcus in my arms. "Bastard child. Poor boy will never belong." I said nothing. I kept my head down. But inside I stacked every insult like bricks. They were building a wall, yes, but they did not know I was building a fortress. One night, after a long shift, I met Jules Baptiste. He was a line cook from Haiti, working in a shabby kitchen that smelled of old grease. He watched me slice onions, quick and clean. He stopped me. "You have the hands of a chef, Loretta," he said. "Do not let them take that from you." I almost laughed. A chef? I was a tired woman with a baby and 3 jobs, but his words stuck. I carried them home with me. I whispered them when Marcus was sick and I had no money for medicine. I whispered them when my back ached so bad I thought I would not stand another day. I whispered them until they felt true. Years passed like shifts in a kitchen. Long, hot, endless. But each one finished if you kept moving. I learned new recipes. I learned to stretch $1 until it screamed. I learned that every burn could teach you something if you did not give up. Once on the street, I saw Daniel again. He was holding the hand of a pale woman in a clean white coat. He looked at me and then away. His lips moved just enough for me to read them. I had no choice. That was all he left me. 4 words. A coward's excuse. He chose comfort. I chose survival. Marcus grew by my side. He sat in the back of kitchens while I worked. He drew on scraps of paper with broken pencils. Sometimes he asked about his father. I told him what mattered. I told him his father was a man who feared losing what he had, and I was a woman who refused to live in fear. By then, I was no longer the girl they dragged out of that dining room. I was a woman with a child and a fire that would not go out, and soon the world would taste it. If I stayed, their shadow would crush me. So I left, with a child, a bag of clothes, and nothing else. I chose a city far enough that no one knew the Whitmore name, far enough that no one whispered when I walked past. Chicago, loud, crowded, unforgiving. But it was mine now. The first months were survival. A room with 1 window, walls thin as paper. I worked in kitchens where the grease never came off the floor. I scrubbed, I chopped, I collapsed. Then I woke and did it again. Marcus grew beside me. He learned to sleep through the noise of pots clanging. He learned to keep quiet when I was too tired to speak. At night, he would touch my arm and say, "Mama, one day you will have your own restaurant." I wanted to laugh, but instead I said, "One day, yes, and you will stand beside me." Time moved like steam, hot, heavy, invisible. Then one evening, something shifted. I was cooking at a community fair, just trying to make a little extra. A woman stopped at my table. She tasted my food and did not move for a long time. Then she looked at me and said, "This is not just food. This is a future. You need a place of your own." Her name was Rosa Bennett, a woman who carried herself like she owned the ground she walked on. I told her I could barely pay rent. She only smiled. Marcus pulled my sleeve and whispered, "Mama, say yes. This is the door." So I said yes. With Rosa's help, I opened my first restaurant. Small, shabby, with tables that wobbled and paint that peeled. But the smell of my kitchen drifted down the street. People came, they sat, they ate, and they came back with friends. One night, I overheard a man at the door whisper, "Who is this woman? She can cook." Those words tasted sweeter than anything I had ever made. Soon, the local paper wrote a story. My name was printed for the first time, and it was not followed by laughter. I cut the article out and pinned it above my stove. For the first time, I felt seen. Years rolled forward. The restaurant filled night after night. Reviewers came. A star followed my name. Michelin, the kind of star that once belonged only to others. I stood in that kitchen and thought of the night they called me trash. Now, strangers called me a chef. But I did not stop there. I saw other restaurants, once proud, now dying, empty tables, broken menus, owners ready to give up. I began to buy them, one by one. I changed the menus. I retrained the cooks. I made the kitchens mine. I did not just cook anymore, I told myself. I built an empire, one failing kitchen at a time. Each new opening felt like a piece of armor. Each success, another brick in the fortress I had promised myself. People now spoke my name with respect. Some even spoke it with fear. Loretta Miles, the woman who turned failure into fire. Marcus was no longer a boy. He wore the suit of a manager, walked with quiet pride. He was my partner, my proof that the child they called dirt had become the cornerstone of everything I built. I stood in one of my own dining rooms one night. Chandeliers above, white cloth on the tables, cameras flashing. And I thought of the alley where I once whispered to my unborn child, "We will live, we will not forget." They threw me out with nothing. 20 years later, I owned kitchens they could only dream of. I had become what they feared most, a black woman with power. And I was not done yet. 30 years had passed since that night. I was no longer the girl who walked out with nothing. I was a woman who had built something real. By then, I owned 12 restaurants across different cities. 3 of them had Michelin stars. The newspapers wrote about me often. They called me one of the most successful chefs of my generation. I never forgot where I came from, but I had reached the top of the profession. Marcus was 30 now. He had finished school, worked in my kitchen since he was a teenager, and he understood the business better than anyone. He was not a boy anymore. He was my partner, the one who kept the numbers in line, who managed staff when I was on the road. I was proud of him. He was the proof that the child they once mocked had grown into a man of value. One morning, he brought me a newspaper. He placed it on the table in my office and said, "Mama, you should see this." The headline was clear: Whitmore dining faces collapse. I read the article slowly. The house that once stood so high was now deep in debt. Arthur and Margaret were too old to save it. Daniel and his wife Claire had been running the place, but they had no skill. Customers left, bills piled up, and bankruptcy was close. I pressed my hand on the page and remembered every word they once threw at me. Trash, do not belong, bastard child. Now their name was drowning in public. I looked at Marcus and said, "The name that pushed me down is about to disappear." That evening, we met Rosa Bennett at one of my restaurants. She had been my friend and investor from the beginning. Marcus was angry. He said, "We should move fast." We should buy it now and make them answer to us. I shook my head. Not yet. If I walk in with my name, they will reject me, even in ruin. Pride is stubborn. They must not know I am behind it. Rosa leaned forward. Then let me do it. They do not know me. They will see only an investor. I nodded. Yes, you will be the face. Marcus will handle the papers. I will stay silent until the right moment. Weeks passed. Rosa met with Daniel and Claire. I did not go. I stayed in my own kitchen waiting for news. When Rosa came back, she told me what happened. Daniel had tried to act confident, but his suit was too tight and his voice shook. Claire smiled, but it looked forced. They talked about tradition, about saving the family business. Finally, Daniel admitted the truth. We need help. The same word he once denied me, now spoken like a man begging for air. Rosa said she let them talk, then gave her conditions. They agreed to everything. They had no choice. They signed papers that gave her full control. They thought she was their savior. Rosa called me after it was done. They begged, Loretta, she said. They were thankful I came. They believe I saved them. I answered, they are not saved. They just sold the last piece of pride they had. Marcus brought me the folder with the contracts. Every line was legal, clean, final. The Whitmore house was gone. They still thought the name belonged to them, but on paper it was Rosa's. And behind Rosa, it was mine. Marcus asked, when do we tell them? I said, not yet. Let them send out invitations. Let them prepare for the reopening. Let them believe they still own it. Only then, when the lights are on and the room is full, will they see me walk out. And we chose a date for the reopening. Rosa would stand at the front as the new owner. Daniel and Claire would welcome guests, smiling as if nothing had changed. The press would be there, waiting for a story of rebirth, and I would wait in the back, silent, until the moment came to show them the truth. They once dragged me out of that house. Now they were about to open the doors for me. They thought Rosa's hand had saved them, but it was mine all along. And soon, they would know it. The day came. Not with music or champagne, not with honored guests or flashing cameras. It came with chairs pulled into a wide circle in the main dining room. Every staff member sitting shoulder to shoulder, waiting to hear the future of the house they had served for years. The Whitmores were there too. Arthur, too frail to stand for long. Margaret, her hair white now, her hands shaking as she clutched her cane. Daniel sat stiff in a dark suit, Claire beside him with a notebook she never opened. They believed Rosa Bennett was about to speak as their new partner. They believed they had been rescued. Rosa stood first. She thanked the staff for holding on through hard times. She spoke of change, of stability, of a chance to rebuild. The room stayed silent. People listened with weary eyes. They had heard promises before. Then Rosa paused. Her voice softened. It is time you meet the true owner of this house. The doors opened, and I walked in. Every sound in the room stopped. The scrape of chairs, the whispers, even the hum of the ceiling fan seemed to fall away. I walked steady, step by step, until I stood in the center of the circle. The floor under me was the same wood they had once dragged me across. Now it carried me back on my own terms. I looked around. Faces I had never seen, faces worn by years in the kitchen, faces that once feared losing their jobs. And then I looked at them, the family that had branded me trash. Arthur lowered his eyes, unable to meet mine. Margaret's mouth trembled, but no sound came. Daniel froze, his face pale, his lips barely moving. Loretta, he whispered. Yes, I said. My voice was steady. It is me. The silence pressed heavy on every shoulder. Daniel rose, trying to look strong, but his voice betrayed him. I never wanted this. It was my parents. They forced me. They said if I stayed with you, I would lose everything. I had no choice. I stared at him, long enough that he began to look down. No choice? I said at last. You had a choice the night you dropped my hand. You had a choice when you watched them drag me out. You had a choice every year you stayed silent while I raised our child alone. Do not hand me your parents' sins as if your hands are clean." The staff shifted uncomfortably. Claire touched Daniel's arm, but he shook her off. "I am sorry," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "I should have fought for you. I should have stayed." "Sorry," I said. The word tasted bitter. Sorry does not feed a child. Sorry does not pay rent. Sorry does not carry 30 years of fire. You will not pay me with words. You will pay me with work. Some of the younger cooks exchanged looks. One older dishwasher shook his head slowly, as if he too had waited decades to hear justice. I turned to the whole room. From today, this house no longer carries the Whitmore name. That name ends here. For too long it has stood as a symbol of power built on shame. From tonight forward, it carries mine. It joins my chain, under one banner, Miles. There was a pause. Then clapping started from the back. A young server stood and clapped harder. Soon the sound filled the room. Some cried, some smiled. For them, it meant stability. For me, it meant justice. Daniel spoke again, his words tumbling. "Loretta, please, you don't understand." I was young. I was scared. My parents threatened me. They said I would lose my inheritance, my future. What could I do? I turned back to him. "You could have chosen me. You could have chosen our child. You could have chosen courage, but you chose money. You chose silence. And silence is not innocent. It is guilty." He lowered his head. His shoulders sagged. Claire tried to speak. It was not his fault alone. It was the time, the world. I cut her off. "Do not speak to me of the world." The world did not spit in my face. The world did not call me trash. Your family did. And now, you will carry the title you once threw at me. I stepped closer so the entire room could hear. "You once called me the help. Now you are the help. You and your wife will sign as employees in this house. You will wear the aprons you once thought beneath you. You will serve under my name." The staff murmured, some with disbelief, others with quiet satisfaction. They had seen arrogance before. Now they saw it fall. Arthur let out a sigh so deep it sounded like defeat. Margaret dabbed at her eyes but said nothing. The empire they had guarded all their lives had slipped away, and they knew it. I lifted my chin and addressed the room one final time. They dragged me out with nothing. 30 years later, I walked back in with everything. I did not burn their house. I put my name on it. And every day they work beneath that name, they will remember who truly belongs. I looked at Daniel, at Claire, at the weary faces of Arthur and Margaret. They once made me a servant. I made them my staff. That is how I chose to finish the story. And with that, the meeting was over. The Whitmore name was gone. The Miles name stood in its place. And justice, after 30 long years, was served. The night of the reopening finally came. The old Whitmore sign was gone. In its place, new letters shone bright in the evening light. Miles. My name. The name they once spat on, now written across the doors they once slammed in my face. Inside, the dining room was alive again. Tables set with clean cloth, glasses catching the glow of chandeliers, staff standing straighter in their new uniforms. Reporters waited with their pens, neighbors with their cameras, and customers lined up to taste what was promised. I walked through the kitchen before the first plate left the pass. The smell of butter and garlic filled the air. The sound of knives against boards kept a rhythm. It was the same fire I had carried for 30 years, only now it burned under my name. Then they came. Arthur, leaning heavy on a cane. Margaret, her shoulders bent, her hair white as ash. Daniel and Claire followed, but not in suits. They wore the same dark uniforms as the staff, standing in the line, no longer masters of the house. Gasps moved through the crowd as people recognized them. Once they had been untouchable. Now they were workers in the kitchen they used to own. Arthur's voice trembled as he stepped forward. Loretta, we were wrong. We see it now. Please, forgive us. The room froze. Every staff member, every guest turned to see what I would do. Margaret wiped her eyes. She whispered, Let us meet our grandson. We are old. We do not have much time left. Please, Loretta, please let us know him before we die. Marcus stood beside me, tall, steady. His eyes went to mine, waiting. I looked at them, the same faces that once sneered, the same mouths that once called me filth. Now they asked for mercy. Now they wanted the child they had called trash. My voice was calm. You wanted no part of him when he was small and hungry. You will not claim him now that he is grown and strong. Blood does not erase betrayal. Family is not given. It is earned, and you did not earn it. Arthur closed his eyes. Margaret broke into tears. Daniel lowered his head. Claire said nothing. I turned to Marcus and took his hand. He squeezed mine and nodded as if to say, I am yours, Mama. I always was. I walked to the front of the room. The flash of cameras lit my face. I spoke so that every person could hear. 30 years ago, I was thrown out of this house. Tonight, I open it again under my name. This is not just a restaurant. It is proof. Proof that dignity can rise from dirt, that fire can outlast shame, and that no one can decide your worth but you. The room broke into applause, loud, long, rising like thunder. Arthur and Margaret shrank back into the shadows. Daniel and Claire stood silent in their uniforms, faces pale. The Whitmore name was gone. The Miles name stood in its place. I am 70 now. My hands are slower, my steps softer. The fire in the kitchen is carried by younger arms, but it is the same fire I lit long ago. I sit in the quiet sometimes and think of that night. The humiliation, the laughter, the words that cut deep. And I think of the day I walked back through the same doors with the world watching. I built something no one could take away. I raised a son who stands taller than the name that tried to bury him. They begged me for forgiveness. I did not give it. And I have no regret. Happiness was never in their approval. Happiness was standing in my own house under my own name, knowing I survived. And I won.